Assalamu alaikum and peace. You're watching Muslim Network TV, and this is Imam Mujahid. Muslim Network TV is always there on Galaxy 19 satellite, where you're watching us, or Amazon Fire TV, Roku, as well as on our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. Of course, we are on our YouTube channel and Facebook as well. While the world is lost in the pandemic and struggle for racial justice and criminal justice reform is on in America, somebody is doing what they always do: take over the Palestinian land, and that's Israelis. Palestine continue to disappear. There were Israelis' policy allowing illegal Jewish settlement on Palestinian lands. They built a massive network of highways, walls, and checkpoints, isolating Palestinians from each other and from their own farmland. Then there were construction restrictions for Palestinians who cannot build their own homes or on their own properties. Hardly anybody will be given any permission to do that. So no one should be surprised about the forthcoming annexation. It is a logical conclusion, in a way, of ongoing project of Zionism, whose goal seems to be keep eating up the Palestinian land. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the move is stemming from the US President Trump's peace plan will write, and I quote, "glorious chapter in the history of Zionism," unquote. Who are the proud Zionists in America who could stand up and say this is not a glorious chapter? Taking over the land of your neighbors. Nowhere in Torah, nowhere in New Testament, anywhere, go deep in your heart. Think of those Nazis who took away everything what Jewish people had. And find the call in your heart to stand up and oppose Israel grabbing the land of its neighbor. You don't hear much about it in American media, but there are people. There are some very good Jewish friends. There are many Christians who are speaking up. You may not hear them, but here's the opportunity. One of those people who speak up is Professor Reverend Donald Wagner. Welcome, Don, to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you. It's a great honor, and thank you for that wonderful summary of where we are. You're right on target.
Professor Donald Wagner is an ordained Presbyterian clergyman who has worked with many others to pass boycott Israeli product by the Presbyterian national denomination. He has published 5 books on the various aspects of Palestinian struggle for freedom. That includes critique of Zionism, challenging Christian Zionism, and on Palestinian human rights. He's a former professor of Middle Eastern Studies at North Park University in Chicago. And 2 years ago, he retired as the National Program Director of Friends of Sabeel North America, which is a Palestinian Christian solidarity organization. Donald, you keep saying that you're retired, but each time I call you, you're on Zoom with Palestine, doing something for Palestine. What is your retirement about?
Yeah, retirement is mostly about Palestine.
Okay.
And my wife is Palestinian, so we do this together.
All right.
Many others.
So when was the last time you visited Palestine?
Linda and I were there in December, We went to two conferences, Sabeel, which is from my former organization. Their headquarters is Jerusalem. They had a conference on Palestine and human rights. And then Kairos, which is a coalition of Christian Palestinians based in Bethlehem. They hosted a conference. And then we tried to work on my wife's land. Her family's from Petunia, and the Israeli settlement has confiscated two of the best parcels. And it's an Area C, so it would be slated for annexation. So that's why we were there.
So you were in the midst of the thing which is going on. So share us any update about the illegal annexation of illegally occupied West Bank.
Yeah. Well, I think we should be reminded this is not the first annexation. I mean, a lot of the media acts as if this is the first and only. Basically what Israel did when they forced Palestinians out in the Nakba in 48, 49, then they took a significant percent of historic Palestine and expanded the Zionist state. They, in 67, after the war of 67, they destroyed a whole sector of Jerusalem, the Mughrabi quarter, demolished it and annexed it. And then they annexed greater Jerusalem, all the way up just south of Ramallah and down to Bethlehem. And the annexations have continued. And this is the Zionist strategy, as you so aptly put it. It's to take Palestine, not inch by inch now, it's mile by mile, dunam by dunam, and to destroy any future Palestinian state. Netanyahu and Likud have said repeatedly, not always in the US, but that there will never be a Palestinian state. They're the ones that are not going to negotiate. And now they are saying this is the end of the Palestine issue. So it really is settler colonialism, taking all of Palestine and ghettoizing the Palestinians into little Bantustans. So we already have one state, it's a Zionist state, and it's an apartheid state. So it's a dangerous situation. And if this annexation goes through, it's going to be a serious problem to undo it.
Because the earlier annexation, which accounted for 5 of those, there was nothing which was done to undo that.
No, that's right. And if they have a person in the White House like the corrupt Trump administration and Christian Zionists like Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence, they are supporting this and claiming, this is the will of God because God gave all the land to the Jews. But that's a heretical, distorted reading of the Bible that we are fighting to try to educate people on. But it's used politically now. And when the embassy, U.S. moved the embassy, that was under pressure from Christian Zionists in the United States, organized politically, working with the pro-Israel lobby. They were pushing it more than the Jewish pro-Israel lobby last fall.
Well, I was thinking of getting into, Christian Zionism, but you brought that topic up already here. The first time I saw you was in Islamic college about 35 years ago. And you were at that time talking about Christian Zionism. Could you describe for our audience what is Christian Zionism? And what is the size and the power of these groups?
The simplest definition is Christians that support Zionism. And much of it comes out of a reading of a misreading of the Bible that came from England, really, in the 19th century. But it basically looks at certain biblical texts and puts a future fulfillment around them. So that from the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation, or others, it says there will be a future fulfillment at the end of days when all of Well, that Jesus will return when the Jews return to Palestine. Then Jesus will set up his millennial kingdom, defeat the Antichrist, and Jews will have a choice of either converting to Jesus or face eternal damnation. So it is very anti-Semitic in a way because it does not really respect Judaism. But this end-time drive is a wing of Christian Zionism that's very much at play. And Mike Pence and Mike Pompeo go along with it. We don't know what Trump believes, but he plays with this politically. And the Israelis play with it politically because it's convenient. It gives them political sport. There are more Christian Zionists now organized politically in the United States than there are American Jews. Some say the ratio is 10-1.
Wow.
And
So 10 Christian Zionists and one Jewish Zionist?
Yeah. And they're organized under a group called Christians United for Israel. And if listeners want to tune in, they're having their convention virtually in Washington, D.C., centered in Washington this weekend. And you'll have Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence speaking with the Reverend John Hagee, providing biblical justification for this movement. Then they'll be lobbying Congress on Monday, descending on Congress, pushing them to support the annexation. So our group, Friends of Sabeel North America, is countering this. I'm sorry, they will be lobbying Tuesday. We will be lobbying virtually on Monday. So we would love a significant thousands of Muslims in America to join us on Monday in this. Just Google Friends of Sabeel North America.
How does the virtual lobbying work?
Well, we're doing it in a couple of ways. We're telling people to get online and here are your sound bites. Here's what we want you to say. Oppose the annexation. Begin to work fully for peace. Recognize Palestine. And we're asking people to make little video statements and then send that video to your senators and your representative. With that kind of a statement, we're hearing that they pay more attention to that these days. So anyway, that's what we're doing on Monday. So you can just Google Friends of Sabeel North America and you'll find all of this online.
So Christian Zionists are gathering virtually and lobbying on Monday. And
no, I'm sorry, they're lobbying Tuesday.
Okay.
Our anti-Christian Zionism movement is lobbying on Monday.
Okay.
To preempt them.
All right. So, and do you know what is the website of it?
Yeah, just www.fosna.org, and I'll send it to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that was supposed to be my question also, that if annexation, this latest chapter of annexation, which probably is more significant than the last few steps after. Don't you think after Nakba this may be the most significant annexation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is going to take the Jordan Valley, which is the breadbasket of the Palestinians. They rely on this, for their food tremendously, and Israel's had their eye on it. It's going to take a lot of the land. Well, Area C surrounds the settlements, but most of the water resources are in Area C. So they're going to annex that. So water will be less available, and it'll basically just surround the little Palestinian towns, but also the major cities with a controlled area, a military controlled area. So this is settler colonialism on steroids. And this will be very, very problematic.
So is it already sure that it is going to be Jordan Valley? I mean, have they made any announcement?
They haven't made it clear, but it probably will. And some of our Palestinian analysts are saying Netanyahu sees the opposition. The European Union is screaming. A significant group of rabbis, Jewish professors have sent petitions. There's some opposition from even the Democrats in Congress, but none of them have teeth in it. Even the European Union making strong opposition, but not going to sanctions. Until there's sanctions on Israel where they pay an economic cost, it's not going to do anything. So they're saying with this opposition, Netanyahu may do it in stages and slow it down a bit. But the Jordan Valley, he's often talked about, is high priority. And then go to the Area C that borders Israel and take the water resources totally under Israeli control. They already are in some ways. And that should be said, that you already have de facto annexation. What Israel has been doing.
Yeah, let's talk about it after we take this short break, because occupation is already there. The government is paralyzed.
Yeah, so we have de facto annexation. This will just make it more legal.
Yes. You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Mujahid, and I'm talking with Reverend Donald Wagner, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. You're watching us on satellite Galaxy 19, as well as on muslimnetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, and Roku. And this is Imam Mujahid. I'm talking with Professor Don Wagner. Before the break, we were talking about annexation. This is going to be more significant a step. But we're talking about occupied land to begin with.
Exactly.
What authority Palestinians have there?
Really, most of the West Bank is gone, except for some of the population centers and the Jordan Valley. So we call it de facto annexation has happened, and it's been a slow process. And during the Oslo Accord, with U.S. help, Israel continued to eat up the land. You've heard the analogy that the Israelis and the Palestinians sit down to a beautiful pizza, and then they tie the hands of the Palestinian negotiator behind his back while the Israelis eat the pizza. And now we only have a small fraction, maybe 20% left, and they've got it so that Ramallah will be surrounded by settlements. Nablus, Bethlehem already is. They'll be walled in. So the Palestinians will be isolated in these what they call Bantustans, so little independent areas. And Israel will control all the borders, the majority of the land. They control the air, the land, and all the resources. So that's the future of the Palestinians in these Bantustans. An enslavement in a way, with total Zionist control over the land and everything.
So at this moment, the Palestinian authority, which is called
PA.
What authority this authority has?
Well, the PA was created as a result of Oslo, and it was I think it was by design by the U.S. and by Israel to split the PA off from the PLO, which is the larger global movement of Palestinians in diaspora. So the PA has had to do the security work in order to get money through the Oslo Accords. And it basically has been a tool of Israel. Thankfully, the PLO broke from this a few weeks ago and said we have no longer any reason to keep this agreement. We break from all the Oslo agreements. We've gotten nothing out of them. And now the PA is free. And the one thing, two things to remember, that there are about 138 or 139 countries in the world that recognize a Palestinian state.
But they haven't declared it a Palestinian state, have they?
They have. They support it as a state. But the Palestinians now, Israel knows what's happened, so they've taken the land and controlled the people. But that gives some leverage, and part of the leverage is that means international law now applies. And the PLO will be able to file cases, and we have a case before the International Criminal Court with Israel. And if that can go forward under U.S. and Israeli pressure to kill it, that gives some leverage to begin to move. So that
sanctions against the ICC prosecutor because of that.
I think. They're making all kinds of threats, and the U.S. is working with Israel on that. But that gives some leverage now. And now if the PLO can begin to organize itself and move and organize the people to work in resistance diplomatically and then through the courts and put pressure on the European Union for sanctions. We need global sanctions now to put economic leverage on Israel. And I think that's one of the main things that has to happen now.
So, I mean, as a process of those eating a bit here and bit there, Palestinians are never granted, in hardly any time they are granted a permit to build their own houses on their own property.
No, they're not.
Israel have to grant that permit. So if Palestinians have declared a state, why that state does not grant those Palestinian right to reconstruct their own home on their own property?
Simply because the Palestinian Authority and the PLO have no control over the land. And you have the superpower Israel who has all the controls. And so remember that
they have declared that they no longer abide by the Oslo Treaty.
Right.
So theoretically they're free, and theoretically they can start, because one of the major issue for Palestinian, a friend of mine told me when they were who became refugee 3 times through Nakba and later on, that his mother kept the property document under her shoes, so Israelis don't take it away from her, and they lost those papers. So papers are a big deal, right? We see now the genocide in Burma of Rohingya people. I mean, their documents were taken away, and then they say they are illegals. And thrown out, and they cannot go back until they prove they're legal, and they cannot prove that legal because they took away the papers.
Let me give you the case of my wife.
Take a proactive step and issue papers of property on which they are on, and the property which was taken away by settlers.
I use my wife as an example. Her father gave her 6 parcels of land passed down to the family. Her sister and brother did not really want to do anything with it, so she got their authority. So she's the primary owner of the property. 2 years ago, we went to check on the properties just outside Ramallah in Betunia, and we wanted to see it. So we were told, sorry, an Israeli settler company has taken it. She has the paper. She said, what? I have the papers right here. The military said, sorry, you are in a military area. The settlement has control of the papers. You're going to have to fight this in court. So she will have to fight it in the Israeli courts, and Palestinians always lose. Even though they have the papers, they can have a case, but the settler rights are upheld. So
So
that's the situation.
is the part of the Palestinian Israeli law that settlers' right has precedent over Palestinian rights?
It's not in the law, but that's the way it works. And
Hmm.
now with this new law, you know, that makes basically Palestinians third-class citizens, you know, kind of the birther law, is going to be even more difficult. So the courts are going to favor settlers every time. She's one of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have papers, who have documents, but you cannot win it in the Israeli courts.
Well, and International Criminal Court does not have any implementation authority, I guess. I mean,
Well,
they
yes, it may. It may. If some of these cases get to the criminal court, and they will, and I don't know exactly what cases they have, but I think they're prosecuting possibly Netanyahu and some of the generals for war crimes. That is going to have leverage. And that means that if they went to any European country, they could be arrested if they're convicted as criminals.
Yes, as an individual.
Yeah. And then if sanctions can begin to rise and the world begins to see the criminality of Israel proven by the criminal court, I think we will get some leverage and some movement. But that's down the road.
So what options do Palestinians have?
Well, I mean, I'll take some of our Palestinian Christian friends who say, I see most of our families leaving Bethlehem and going to Chile, Australia, whatever. Many of our people are leaving. But a hardcore are going to stay. And there's resistance. There's significant nonviolent resistance. We don't see it right now. But the Palestinian Authority, prior to a month, was suppressing some of that. Now they're not going to. So, and also there's movement now among Palestinian intellectuals and some of the political people to develop a more proactive strategy. And I think as they get the PLO back up and running globally, so that you have representatives in every European country and organizing, we're going to see a more proactive Palestinian movement, and they'll have to articulate a vision of where to go. I mean, I can't say if I'm one state or two state so on position. This is up to the Palestinians to decide. So we need to take our cues from them. But right now, I think this is a very fluid time where Palestinian leaders are formulating their strategy and their future. And I think we're going to be in a new day to raise global furor against Israel and vote people out of office who don't come on board and support justice for the Palestinians in a Palestinian state.
Well, the history of the United States politics is a competition between Democrats and Republicans who can beat the other in support of Israel. So what hope do you have from the electoral system?
Well, we're getting more progressives elected. We saw Engel defeated yesterday in the primary in New York. He has been one of AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby's favorite congressmen for 16 years. He was defeated by an African-American principal of a school in the Bronx who supports Palestinian rights. Here in the 3rd District in Chicago, Representative Lipinski was defeated in the primary. He was a major supporter of Israel. And the new progressive person, Marie Newman, who we hope will win in November, understands Palestine. And there's movements in Congress. Israel detains an average of 2 Palestinian kids a day in prison. And there's now a bill in front of Congress, Bill 2407 in the House of Representatives, to link U.S. military and foreign aid to Israel on Israel's human rights performance. Thus far, there haven't been that many who have signed on. I think maybe 30. But if more progressives, and they will be elected in November, and this will be a way to put leverage on Israel, even in the United States, in the Congress. And that's to link human rights performance by Israel to U.S. foreign and military aid. And it's actually on the bills of Congress. The Leahy Law of 1976 is that you cannot violate human rights and receive U.S. foreign and military aid. But the lobby has, prevented that being used. Now, I think we are going to begin to see that come into play.
Well, I always like to hear and talk to hopeful people. That give me hope when I meet some hopeful people. You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Mujahid on Mujahid Talks. And with me is Professor Don Wagner, who I have, as long as I have known him, he's talking Palestine or Christian Zionist, and we will talk about Christian non-Zionist when we come back after this. You're watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, as well as muslimnetwork.tv. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Mujahid, and I'm talking with Reverend Don Wagner, who is a ordained Presbyterian minister who among other people, led a campaign to pressure Israel through congregations. So Presbyterian are a mainline church, and I heard they are facing challenges and scaling down in terms of their staff and all that. I hear the same thing when the National Council of Churches, its president, was visiting me in my office, and he was talking more or less the same thing about the challenges mainline churches are facing. And his recipe, he told me, was, I tell people, if you're worried about it, get into your bedroom. And for a minute, I didn't figure out what he was saying. But I woke up to what he was alluding to. But you're saying there are 10 Christian Zionists for one Jewish Zionist. Tell me first, what is happening to Christians in Palestine and why it is happening, and how many Christians in America know what is happening to Christians in Palestine?
Yeah, this is a tragic and largely untold story that many of us have been trying to tell, and the Palestinian Christians have been trying to tell, and Muslims are helping us. Well, first of all, I think there's been such a dramatic decline since Israel became a state. And just to use Bethlehem, in 1948, Bethlehem was 86% Christian.
86%?
86% Christian in 48. Do you know what it is today? 13%.
Oh, no.
And more Bethlehem Christians live in Chile and many in the U.S. They've just left. And, a survey was done by Bethlehem University.
Why did you, for those people who do not know, Bethlehem is like a Kaaba or Medina for Muslim. That's what Bethlehem is for Jewish.
Oh, yeah. Well, Bethlehem is where the Church of the Nativity is, where Jesus was born. and it always was a strong Christian center. Beit Zahor, which is just down the hill, Shepherd's Field, is still maybe
Muslim remaining a large majority in Palestine. Bethlehem was 86% Christian.
right. And what has happened, you can stand on the hill in Beit Jala and look out, and you will look over many villages that were destroyed and now have become settlements. And most of those villages were Muslim. Those people had to flee, and they came into Bethlehem because that's where the jobs were. And the Christian, and it's not because there was tension between the Christians and the Muslims, but that's just simply where people fled. And it's still happening. There's a Muslim village just up the hill from Bethlehem, Awalija. They have been displaced 3 times by the Zionists, and they just lost their village again. So those people will probably move into Bethlehem Center.
Yeah, that's the large city, probably. It's
the largest city, so it's drawn people with jobs and everything. And it's not because there's tensions with the Muslims. A survey was done by a Palestinian university. It wasn't Bethlehem University. It was, I'll tell you, Dar al-Kalima. And the survey had allowed people to take 5 options on why Christians have left. And they surveyed about 1,500 people, half Muslim and half Christian. And all the reasons, 4 of the 5 reasons, had to do with the occupation, the loss of land, loss of job, loss of a future. Tension with Muslims was way down there. About 2% listed that, and maybe they had some personal conflict with the family. And now you have the Trump administration saying this is a religious conflict between Christians and Muslims. It's a political problem that has to be solved politically. So most of the mainline churches are saying this is a political problem and we are working politically to resolve it. But Trump and the Christian Zionists are saying it's a religious problem with the Muslims. So we have to overcome that. And so we have probably there's 10 denominations like Lutherans, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, United Church of Christ, who are on board with a progressive approach to Palestine with a political solution, and support legislation in Congress to try Israel for violations of human rights and cutting aid. Most of these denominations support BDS, and we get attacked for that. But we're standing firm. And these are the people that we want to work with Muslims on, and progressive Jews like Jewish Voice for Peace and Rabbis for Human Rights. So I think we will see, hopefully, a new movement developing that'll be much more aggressive to offset the power of the Christian Zionists. And if we can do that, we'll encourage some of these Palestinian Christians to stay and work with their Muslim brothers on a new Palestine. But it's a real uphill battle.
So what are the means of communication for Christians who are pro-Palestine in the United States? Why Christians, by and large, don't know? Because the mainstream media, I Google Palestine and different things this morning for the news, and there is hardly any talk about these issues. So what is the alternate media which Christians like yourself use in the United States to connect with other Christians that what is happening to Christians in the Holy Land?
Well, a lot of it is social media, but there are some sites, Truth Out, and there's a number of blogs. Mondo Weiss is very good. Electronic Intifada. And these issues can be covered there, and Israel does not control them. You won't find CNN, the most progressive MSNBC, they barely touch this, whether it's Christian or Muslim or anybody. but I think we are in a time with significant change, and we're trying to work closely with Black Lives Matter, with the Hispanic Latinx movement. So there's a whole new movement of many young, aggressive, progressive Black clergy, Muslims, young Muslims from AMP and others, Sound Vision, that's emerging. And this is the wave of the future. And I find this is what gives me hope. Some of us are now dying out, we're moving on, but if we can support these young voices and work intersectionally, that we work on police reform with our Black Lives Matter friends, they then come in turn and work with us on Palestine. That's already happening. So through social media and some of the media available to us, I think we're going to make a difference.
Well, it makes me feel young when you mention young people and Sound Vision together. But Sound Vision as a means of communication does, hope to have these voices, although we're not an organization dedicated to this particular cause. But human rights and justice, peace, fairness, and equity, we consider core of our faith.
Yeah.
And God Almighty has told us in the Quran that He sent all the prophets, including Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for one purpose: to help people stand up for peace, justice, fairness, and equity. So I think you as a Christian probably are motivated with similar teachings. But why Christian Zionists are unable to open their hearts and ears to this particular information?
Yeah, this is the great puzzle. And there are answers. I grew up as a Christian Zionist. My family, many of them, I can hardly talk to my sister about some of these issues. We have to put it aside. She and her husband are Trump supporters, but slowly I'm trying to open her mind. But my father changed toward the end of his life. And he began to take on total understanding of the Palestine problem, and he shifted in his position on war and so on. So a lot of
more because of his re-understanding of his own theology, or it was more the plight of the human being which moved him?
It was a combination of understanding his faith, his reading of the Bible differently, and of political events. It was a combination of all these things. And I've seen change, but it's very difficult. I'll be on a Zoom call in 1 hour with a group that I helped organize called ChristianZionism.org. You all can Google ChristianZionism.org. These are evangelical Christians who oppose what Israel is doing and oppose this end time reading of the Bible and pro-Israel reading of the Bible. And you can scroll through interpretations of the Bible that challenge the Christian Zionism perspective, written by evangelicals for evangelicals. The evangelical movement is an umbrella, and the fundamentalists have captured the politics and the media of evangelicals. And the media is wrong because it calls evangelicals all Christian Zionists. They're not. There's a progressive wing of maybe 20%, and that's what this website is addressing. So go to ChristianZionism.org and you'll see.
As you know, Muslims also are told that Jesus will come, and Muslims are also waiting for Jesus. I hope nobody distort theology there that they become Muslim Zionist.
No, I think we'll be okay on that end.
Other form.
But we need your help as Muslims, in this battle. And there are a lot of churches that can be open to debate and work together and thinking through these problems around Palestine. but also combating Islamophobia and the social issues of our time, like racism.
Don, that's good. I mean, you know that I chair Parliament of the World Religions.
Yeah.
And try to bring even, I believe, so much in dialogue that I have brought actually those people who oppose my perspective, conservatives and liberals, and together on that platform, so to have fair conversation, because sometimes progressive and liberals, as well as conservative, they are all happy in their own shell and their own well.
Yeah.
So I try to bring these people together. But let's talk a little bit in a few minutes, which we have, about the Palestinian refugees. You mentioned to me there are more Palestinian Christian in Chile than there are in Bethlehem, where there used to be 86% and now 13% left. And plight of Muslim Palestinian is not much different. What is happening to Palestinian refugees? I mean, they still probably constitute the largest refugee bloc in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think the estimate is there's about 11 to 12 million Palestinians in the world. 60% are in diaspora. Many are doing very well, but then you have these massive refugee populations in Lebanon, what is left of Syria, huge Palestinian populations and refugee camps in Jordan, but also you have a fairly wealthy Palestinian class in Jordan. And then in the West Bank. So that's why I think the PLO will be important to reconstitute itself. So these folks, the refugees in Lebanon, maybe 400,000, are probably in the worst situation. Many of them are banned from the jobs in Lebanon. They can only do the menial jobs. They don't have travel rights. They're in a very delicate and difficult position. And Lebanon is in crisis right now economically. So these folks need representatives, they need more support, and they don't have a voice. So I think getting the PLO organized will be a real key for representation. But if the PLO can reorganize and become a global voice for Palestinians, and you have Palestinians with money all over the world who could have representation, I think this will be an important step in the future. But the big concern are these refugees in the refugee camps around Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, what's left of them.
Don, I like your hopefulness, and I like you mentioning the rich Palestinian and millionaires, and I don't know who they are, but are they really connected back home? Do they really care for Palestine? I remember, a whole lot of businesses, in Chicago and here who are Palestinian. I don't see them anywhere involved in activism for Palestine. Do you see them?
Not many. I've always been trying to find them.
Are they less hopeful about Palestine than you are?
Yeah, maybe. But I think there's now more of an attempt to organize them. The Palestinians have been fragmented for so long.
People are. I mean, I work with the Rohingyas and Uyghurs and Kashmiris and Indian Muslim, the minorities and the oppressed people. Maybe there is some psychological theory of trauma, but I do find them fragmented, disorganized.
Yeah. I mean, they've been fragmented politically, Fatah, Jabhat Shabiya, and Demokratia, also fragmented in terms of geographically in different places. But there are many who give in their own way. They support their families. A lot of wealthy Palestinians just pour their money into their families. I know a lot of the Petunia people are helping Petunia and give big time. Wealthy Palestinians are helping Petunia build up again and contribute. So many give in these ways. But I think there needs to be a rechanneling to help us politically
Hmm.
so that we can really have more support. There's a wonderful group called Palestine Legal here in Chicago. That'd be a great interview. Dima Khalidi, daughter of Rashid Khalidi.
Okay.
They are defending all these students who are taking a stand for BDS, then getting threatened or
Hmm.
whatever. They need money and support. I try to give to them, but I'm poor. But organizations like that could really be maximized, increase their staff. And there's many, that's just one example. American Friends Service Committee, if we can get more funding for some of these local committees to lobby and put pressure on, we haven't been able to do that. So I hope that will come as people see that, we can have some movement on Palestine in the next few years.
Well, thank you, Don Wagner. You are a movement in yourself. You continue to, I don't know whether you're working harder before retirement or after retirement, but you keep working on it. And
Yeah.
remaining hopeful is one way to get other people excited and hopeful. Now, give me in 1 minute what Americans must do for Palestine and why it is important for you.
Well, I think Palestine is a microcosm for all of us, Christians, Muslims, Jews. And it's a microcosm of settler colonialism, championing and defeating justice for indigenous people. So African Americans, Native Americans can see through Palestine a movement. So if we can stand up and defeat Zionism, which is a racist ideology, and defeat racism here, and Zionism is a racist ideology at its core, I think a victory there will give encouragement across the board. But the key thing is we can all work together on this. We need each other. Palestinians alone can't do it. A handful of Christians can't do it. And the disappearing Christians of Palestine need the Muslims to work together. So if we can work intersectionally, we call it, to liberate Palestine, have a Palestinian state, defeat Zionism, and that will free Jews from what Zionism has done to Judaism.
Well, thank you, Don Wagner. Thank you so much. You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Mujahid, and we're always on Galaxy 19 satellite, Muslim Network.tv, Raku, Amazon Fire TV, and many, many other places. And we look forward to you telling your friends that finally there is a Muslim American television and it is all over the world. Unless you tell them, they will not find out about it. And we have 8-hour programming repeated 3 times right here on this channel. Thank you. Salam. Peace.